It was a quiet summer night in June 2015 when a Facebook post shattered the peace of a small Missouri neighborhood. "That bee is dead." The message flashed on Dee Dee Blanchard's account. At first, friends thought her page had been hacked. But then the comments started pouring in, people asking if it was some kind of joke or a cry for help. Police rushed to the Blanchard's small pink house in Springfield, Missouri, a home everyone in town recognized. Dee Dee and her daughter, Gypsy Rose, were local celebrities. The mother was known for her endless devotion, caring for her sick, wheelchair-bound daughter, who'd battled leukemia, muscular dystrophy, and countless other conditions. They were seen at charity events, on news stories, and even got a home built by Habitat for Humanity. But when officers pushed open the bedroom door that night, what they found didn't fit the story the world knew. Dee Dee Blanchard was lying face down in her bed, stabbed multiple times, the air still heavy with the metallic scent of blood. Her wheelchair-bound daughter was nowhere to be found. The pink house that had symbolized unconditional love now looked like a crime scene from a nightmare. The oxygen tanks, the feeding tubes, the hospital bed, all stood there, untouched, staged like props in a play that had suddenly gone off script. As detectives searched the rooms, confusion turned to horror. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows. But one thing was clear. Gypsy Rose was gone. Within hours, an Amber Alert was issued. The entire country was on high alert. A vulnerable young girl kidnapped after her mother's brutal murder. But when police tracked her social media activity and traced the location of that Facebook post, what they discovered flipped the entire narrative upside down. Gypsy wasn't kidnapped. She had run away. And she wasn't the helpless child the world thought she was. She could walk. She could talk. She wasn't sick at all. The murder of Dee Dee Blanchard wasn't just a homicide. It was the collapse of a lifetime built on lies, manipulation, and a mother's dangerous obsession with control. This is the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, the girl who spent her entire childhood trapped in a lie, and what happened when she finally broke free. Before the world knew about the murder, Dee Dee Blanchard had already created a perfect image, that of a devoted mother caring for her sick little girl. Everyone in town admired her for how she handled her daughter's countless illnesses. She told doctors that Gypsy Rose suffered from leukemia, muscular dystrophy, seizures, asthma, hearing loss, and even a rare chromosomal disorder. To her, every ache or bruise was another medical crisis. Gypsy believed it all. She had grown up hearing that she was fragile and weak. She thought she needed a wheelchair, that she'd never walk again. The community adored Dee Dee. Charities helped with medical bills, local news celebrated their strength, and Habitat for Humanity even built them a pink house with a wheelchair ramp. The Blanchards were seen as heroes. But behind those pastel walls, things weren't what they seemed. Dee Dee controlled every part of Gypsy's life, what she ate, who she talked to, even how she thought. She kept medical files locked, moved hospitals whenever doctors got suspicious, and demanded silence. Gypsy underwent unnecessary surgeries, took endless medications, and was fed through a tube for no reason. When she questioned her illnesses, Dee Dee reminded her that she was lucky to be alive, and that no one else would take care of her. It wasn't care, it was control. Experts later called it Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disorder where a caregiver lies or causes illness to gain sympathy or attention. The more sympathy Dee Dee received, the tighter her control became. Neighbors saw a loving mother. Gypsy saw a prison guard. Dee Dee's kindness outside the home vanished behind closed doors. As Gypsy grew older, she began noticing cracks in her mother's story. Her hair grew back, she felt no pain, and she could walk when Dee Dee wasn't looking. Slowly, she realized she wasn't sick at all. But every time Gypsy tried to speak up, Dee Dee shut her down. She'd threatened to break her fingers, take away her computer, or call the police to say Gypsy was mentally unstable. The message was clear: don't question me. Gypsy lived in fear, trapped in a world built on lies. Her pink wheelchair became a symbol of control, not care. That house, the one built out of charity and love, had turned into a cage, and deep down, Gypsy knew something that terrified her more than anything else. If she ever tried to escape, her mother would never let her go alive. As Gypsy entered her late teens, she started questioning the world her mother had built around her. For years, she believed every word Dee Dee said, that she was sick, weak, and dependent. But now, she could feel the cracks forming in that story. Dee Dee still ruled every part of her life. She controlled what Gypsy ate, when she slept, and who she talked to. She kept her isolated from the world, telling everyone that Gypsy's mental state was too fragile for a normal life. But inside, Gypsy's curiosity was growing stronger. Since she never went to school, Gypsy learned about the outside world through Disney movies and old magazines. She dreamed of freedom, of walking outside without fear, of living like those happy girls on TV. Late at night, when her mother slept, she'd sneak onto her computer to explore the world she was forbidden to see. Online, Gypsy discovered what real life looked like: people talking, laughing, falling in love. She joined chat rooms and started creating fake profiles. For the first time, she wasn't a sick child in a wheelchair. She was just a girl trying to find herself. That's when she met Nicholas Godejohn, a man from Wisconsin. He was shy, awkward, and struggled with his own mental health, but he treated Gypsy like she was normal. Their bond grew quickly. They talked for hours about everything: movies, faith, and love. Nicholas told her she was special. He said he could be her protector. For a girl who'd spent her whole life being controlled, those words felt like magic. Slowly, their relationship turned romantic, and soon, they started building a fantasy world of their own. They imagined being together, getting married, starting a family, escaping the control of her mother. Nicholas even created alter egos, one of which he claimed was dangerous and willing to do anything for her. Gypsy didn't stop him. Deep down, she began to see him as her only way out. In 2011, she tried to run away for the first time. She dressed up, put on a wig, and attended a local convention. For a few hours, she felt alive. But Dee Dee found her and dragged her home. She smashed Gypsy's phone, threatened her, and warned her never to try again. That incident changed Gypsy completely. She became quiet, obedient, and careful. She smiled for charity events, posed for photos, and acted like the perfect daughter. But behind the smile, she was planning her escape, and she knew it couldn't just be another failed attempt. By 2014, her secret relationship with Nicholas had grown darker. Their chats became more intense, and Gypsy started sharing details of her abuse. Nicholas told her he could stop it all, that he could take care of Dee Dee. At first, Gypsy hesitated, but years of control had twisted her sense of right and wrong. The idea of freedom began to outweigh the fear of what it might cost. She told Nicholas she was ready to be free, no matter what it took. In June 2015, Nicholas boarded a bus from Wisconsin to Missouri. They had planned everything. He would come to her house at night, and Gypsy would unlock the door. She'd finally be free. That evening, Dee Dee and Gypsy watched movies together. They ate dessert, laughed, and went to bed. But as her mother slept, Gypsy quietly got up and unlocked the door. Nicholas entered the house carrying a knife. Gypsy hid in the bathroom, covering her ears. Minutes later, the sound of struggle filled the house. When she finally stepped out, Dee Dee was gone. The woman who had controlled her entire life was dead, and Gypsy believed her nightmare was finally over. June 14, 2015. It was a quiet night in Springfield, Missouri. Inside the small pink house at the end of West Volunteer Way, Everything seemed calm. Dee Dee Blanchard was asleep, unaware that the world she had built on lies was about to end. Earlier that day, Gypsy acted as she always did, kind, soft-spoken, and obedient. She helped her mother with medication, smiled during dinner, and watched TV beside her on the couch. But behind that calm smile, her mind was racing. Nicholas Godejohn had arrived that evening after a long bus ride from Wisconsin. He was nervous, exhausted, and obsessed. Gypsy met him secretly outside the house, her heart pounding. It was the first time they had ever seen each other in person. She led him to the side of the house and whispered that her mother was asleep. Nicholas carried a knife, one Gypsy had bought for him online weeks earlier. She told him where her mother's bedroom was and gave him a pair of gloves. Then she went into the bathroom and locked the door. For a few minutes, there was silence. Then came the muffled sounds of movement, followed by Dee Dee's voice, confused, half awake, and afraid. And then, within seconds, everything went quiet again. When Gypsy came out, Dee Dee was gone. Her mother's body lay still on the bed, the sheets stained dark red. For the first time, the house felt both empty and suffocating. Nicholas stood in the hallway, shaking. Gypsy looked at him, her face pale but calm. She whispered, "It's over." They cleaned up what they could. Gypsy packed a few clothes, grabbed some money, and took her mother's phone. Before leaving, she took the knife and wiped it clean. Then, hand in hand, they walked out of the pink house, the same house that had been her prison for so many years. The pair went to a nearby hotel where they stayed for 2 nights. Gypsy dyed her hair, wore new clothes, and took photos with Nicholas. They went out for food, watched movies, and acted like an ordinary couple. For the first time, she felt free, but she also couldn't escape the image of her mother lying in that bed. Meanwhile, friends and neighbors began to worry. Dee Dee and Gypsy were always active on Facebook, but now their page was silent. Then, on June 14th, a disturbing post appeared from Dee Dee's account. "That Beck is dead." People thought it was a hack, maybe a joke. But when messages went unanswered, neighbors called the police. Officers arrived and knocked on the door. No response. When they entered, they found the house cold and quiet, with the medical equipment still running. In the bedroom, they discovered Dee Dee's body. The sight shocked everyone. There was no sign of Gypsy, and all her wheelchairs and medications were still there. The assumption was immediate. Gypsy had been kidnapped, and her mother murdered by whoever took her. An Amber Alert was issued that night. News spread fast. The story of the sick little girl missing after her mother's murder spread across the country within hours. People donated money, shared posts, and prayed for her safe return. But as police traced the Facebook post, the investigation took a strange turn. The IP address wasn't far away. It led to a small town in Wisconsin. Within a day, authorities knocked on the door of Nicholas Godejohn's home. Inside, they found Gypsy Rose, alive, walking, and healthy. The girl everyone thought was paralyzed stood on her own 2 feet. Officers were speechless. For the first time, the truth began to unravel. When police questioned her, Gypsy admitted everything. She said she had suffered years of abuse, that her mother forced her to use a wheelchair and fake illnesses. She confessed that she and Nicholas had planned the killing together, but her words didn't sound proud. They sounded tired. Back in Springfield, the community was stunned. How could this sweet, loving mother have been lying all along? And how could her daughter, the one she had protected, have been part of her death? The story spread like wildfire. Media outlets camped outside the house. Reporters called it the strangest murder in America. Some painted Gypsy as a victim. Others saw her as a manipulator who orchestrated her mother's death. But for Gypsy, it was simple. She had been trapped, terrified, and desperate. To her, freedom was worth anything. even murder. In the days that followed, police gathered evidence from the Blanchard home. They found Dee Dee's forged medical documents, fake prescriptions, and medical files full of lies. Every test, every surgery, every diagnosis had been part of a larger illusion. What had once been seen as a miracle story now looked like one of the most disturbing cases of medical abuse in recent memory. Dee Dee had created sickness out of thin air, and Gypsy had been her experiment. The fairy tale was over, but the world was only beginning to understand how deep the deception really went. When the police released the details of the murder, the entire nation was stunned. The truth was stranger than fiction. The girl everyone thought was a fragile wheelchair-bound victim could walk, talk, and was completely healthy. Gypsy's confession changed everything. She told detectives that her mother forced her into years of fake illnesses, unnecessary surgeries, and constant fear. To the world, Dee Dee was a hero, but to Gypsy, she was a monster in disguise. News outlets flooded the streets of Springfield. Talk shows debated whether Gypsy was a murderer or a victim of severe psychological abuse. Public sympathy leaned heavily toward her. People saw her not as a killer, but as a girl who had finally fought back after years of being trapped. During her trial, Gypsy appeared quiet and polite. She didn't deny what happened. Instead, she told the court she was sorry, not for escaping, but for how it had to happen. Prosecutors acknowledged that Dee Dee's abuse had destroyed Gypsy's sense of reality. In 2016, Gypsy accepted a plea deal for second-degree murder and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. For the first time in her life, she said she felt free. Behind bars, she could walk, eat what she wanted, and make her own decisions. Nicholas Godejohn faced a separate trial in 2018. His defense argued that he was manipulated, but the jury didn't agree. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Gypsy's story didn't end in prison. Instead, it became a worldwide sensation. Documentaries, talk shows, and interviews explored every detail of her life, from the abuse to the killing to the aftermath. In 2017, HBO released Mommy Dead and Dearest, which exposed the full extent of Dee Dee's manipulation. Later, Hulu dramatized the story in The Act, introducing Gypsy's case to millions who had never heard of it before. Inside prison, Gypsy began to heal. She studied, exercised, and formed new friendships. She often said she didn't hate her mother. She pitied her. "I feel freer in here than I ever did living with her," she once told reporters. After serving 8 years, Gypsy Rose Blanchard was released on December 28, 2023. When she walked out of prison, she wasn't the frail little girl the world once knew. She was confident, calm, and ready to live on her own terms. Her release made national headlines. She gained millions of followers on social media within days. People saw her as both a survivor and a symbol of resilience. But others still questioned, did justice truly prevail? Today, Gypsy Rose lives a quiet life, trying to move forward. She has spoken publicly about her experiences, not as a justification, but as a warning about hidden abuse and control. Experts now use her case to study Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a rare but devastating form of psychological manipulation. Hospitals across the U.S. have since implemented better checks for medical child abuse, one small change born out of her tragedy. Gypsy says she forgives her mother. She often describes her as a broken person who didn't know how to love. Yet, every time she speaks about her past, there's a quiet sadness, a reminder that freedom came at the highest price. The Blanchard case remains one of the most haunting true stories of modern America. It's a tale not just of murder, but of deception, desperation, and the blurred line between love and control. In the end, Gypsy Rose's story isn't about revenge. It's about survival. And maybe, in her own way, that's what she had been fighting for all along.